The notice informed them that it was a temporary matter. For 5 days, their electricity would be cut off for 1 hour, beginning at 8 p.m. A line had gone down in the last snowstorm, and the repairmen were going to take advantage of the milder evenings to set it right. The work would affect only the houses on the quiet, tree-lined street, within walking distance of a row of brick-faced stores and a trolley shop where Shobha and Shukumar had lived for 3 years. "It's good of them to warn us," Shobha conceded after reading the notice aloud, more for her own benefit than Shukumar's. She let the strap of her leather satchel, plump with files, slip from her shoulders and left it in the hallway as she walked into the kitchen. She wore a navy blue poplin raincoat over gray sweatpants and white sneakers, looking, at 33, like the type of woman she'd once claimed she would never resemble. She'd come from the gym. Her cranberry lipstick was visible only on the outer reaches of her mouth, and her eyeliner had left charcoal patches beneath her lower lashes. She used to look this way sometimes, Shukumar thought, on mornings after a party, or a night at a bar when she'd been too lazy to wash her face, too eager to collapse into his arms. She dropped a sheaf of mail on the table without a glance. Her eyes were still fixed on the notice in her other hand. "But they should do this sort of thing during the day." "When I'm here, you mean," Shukumar said. He put a glass lid on a pot of lamb, adjusting it so only the slightest bit of steam could escape. Since January, he'd been working at home, trying to complete the final chapters of his dissertation on agrarian revolts in India. "When do the repairs start?" "It says March 19th. Is today the 19th? Shobha walked over to the framed corkboard that hung on the wall by the fridge, bare except for a calendar of William Morris wallpaper patterns. She looked at it as if for the first time, studying the wallpaper pattern carefully on the top half before allowing her eyes to fall on the numbered grid at the bottom. A friend had sent the calendar in the mail as a Christmas gift, even though Shobha and Shukumar hadn't celebrated Christmas that year. "Today, then," Shobha announced. "You have a dentist appointment next Friday, by the way." He ran his tongue over the tops of his teeth. He'd forgotten to brush them that morning. It wasn't the first time. He hadn't left the house at all that day, or the day before. The more Shobha stayed out, the more she began putting in extra hours at work and taking on additional projects, the more he wanted to stay in, not even leaving to get the mail, or to buy fruit or wine at the stores by the trolley stop. 6 months ago, in September, Shukumar was at an academic conference in Baltimore when Shobha went into labor, 3 weeks before her due date. He hadn't wanted to go to the conference, but she had insisted. It was important to make contacts, and he would be entering the job market next year. She told him that she had his number at the hotel and a copy of his schedule and flight numbers, and she had arranged with her friend Gillian for a ride to the hospital in the event of an emergency. When the cab pulled away that morning for the airport, Shobha stood waving goodbye in her robe, with one arm resting on the mound of her belly as if it were a perfectly natural part of her body. Every time he thought of that moment, the last moment he saw Shobha pregnant, it was the cab he remembered most. A station wagon, painted red with blue lettering. It was cavernous compared to their own car. Although Shukumar was 6 feet tall, with hands too big to ever rest comfortably in the pocket of his jeans, he felt dwarfed in the back seat. As the cab sped down Beacon Street, he imagined a day when he and Shobha might need to buy a station wagon of their own to cart their children back and forth from music lessons and dentist appointments. He imagined himself gripping the wheel as Shobha turned around to hand the children juice boxes. Once these images of parenthood had troubled Shukumar, adding to his anxiety that he was still a student at 35. But that early autumn morning, the trees still heavy with bronze leaves, he welcomed the image for the first time. A member of the staff had found him somehow among the identical convention rooms and handed him a stiff square of stationery. It was only a telephone number, but Shukumar knew it was a hospital. When he returned to Boston, it was over. The baby had been born dead. Shobha was lying on a bed, asleep, in a private room so small there was barely enough space to stand beside her, in a wing of the hospital they hadn't been to on the tour for expectant parents. Her placenta had weakened and she'd had a cesarean, though not quickly enough. The doctor explained that these things happen. He smiled in the kindest way it was possible to smile at people known only professionally. Shobha would be back on her feet in a few weeks. There was nothing to indicate that she would not be able to have children in the future.